Our initial response to the first question was elect a fascist dictator state, which didn't go down too well with the table generally. So we came up with some more practical things. Mandate the availability of verified attributes for use by the individual, remove regulatory barriers were a component of that, and also start to think about converting some traditional physical assets that the government may hold as an attribute provider. There was some debate about what they were, but birth certificates, change of name, passports, driving license, which in themselves are documents, but they contain attributes that have had some level of assurance. We concluded that targeting anywhere there was friction, risk, cost and effort was a strong motivator for a business case. Making it possible for citizens to get things done, that might be the sector to start in. And interoperability is what we need, not standards. Standards is an oxymoron if you're as old as me. I've sat on more standards committees and I've had hot dinners. And they're largely a device by people that want to develop proprietary protocols to delay the inevitable. So trust. I think the other factors we felt were important were people had to inherently trust and have confidence, and above all, it had to be safe and easy. Right? We are not, I think Julian made the comment, people will manage nothing. If this is not frictionless and easy, we're going to have a big problem. We then sort of thought, right, where could we start? Well, here's some stats for you. Obviously, Audit Office has not validated these, but taxpayers, roughly 35 million, HMRC may confirm. People living today, i.e. not dead, but on the DWP database for one form of qualifying benefit or another, 19 million. They do have 91 million on the database. 2 million students in higher education. John Harrison, expert on education, gave us that number. Martin Edwards of the Post Office queried it, so we reduced it to higher education on the basis it probably wasn't all secondary schools. And then tenants of registered social landlords who are local authorities, because it qualifies under the current rules that it's a public body, therefore it's got some obligation and duty of care, and they do all manner of testing to make sure you're who you claim to be so you can give them money to live in a house. But above all, human beings. And then we came up with this brilliant idea and thought, what about life events? Getting stuff done, transactions. Moving home was mentioned, that's quite a complicated journey. Applying for a job, trying to rent a car, book a plane ticket, anywhere evidence is needed. If you make it possible for the individual to get stuff done, painlessly and easily, we'll get scale. If we talk about monetisation, the curse of monetisation, we will fail. That's my own footnote, by the way. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you. On my table we had Factern, HMRC, Signicat and positive attributes. So, in terms of critical mass, one of the comments was if we get something that works for lots of government departments, then they'll adopt, and that will drive critical mass in itself. So that would be Verify gaining some momentum. I think we've never seen the transformation in Verify and kind of moves towards standards reviews in there. Then that would be very positive there. Open up more data for ID proofing, and then we talked about the talked about the bank ID example. This is going to be played back to me, isn't it? Like this. The bank ID example in Norway. So what happened there is, the banks had there and have here critical mass of identities. The banks there agreed to non-compete and collaborate on identity. They promoted that to their users, so they put on their landing pages that you can use your ID to log on in different places. And then a key use case there was enabling you to use your bank ID to do your taxes. And I think that, I'm told, was a bit of a tipping point there where customers could use, I can use my bank ID to log on over here, in a way that many consumers had to do, and that really started the ball rolling. The other thing was, in the UK, kind of detoxifying identity for the public. There's still the legacy of the national ID card out there. So when ID is mentioned, people will automatically lead to privacy concerns. So how do we detoxify that as an industry? And then, kind of last point on it was, for somebody to want to consume an ID, the ID itself is usually one part of a more complicated transaction involving much richer attributes. So being able to deliver the ID and the associated attributes, so that's, say, for insurance, yes, you need to know the ID, there's AML obligations there now as well, and then there's additional attributes that an insurer needs to know, your car, your house, your driving history, that would enable them to complete that transaction. And almost within that, do you commoditize the ID bit down and put the value on this sector use case specific attributes and use that to drive it forward. When? How long? 18 months, I think, is how long it's all going to take in terms of what we were told around Verify, or 42 was another answer, being the answer to Life, the Universe and Everything. So we couldn't really answer that one, other than we need to take some action and get some momentum behind this. This is what we're here about. I reflect the Open Identity Exchange, the people here today. We've all got a stakeholding in this. We all want to see this ecosystem move forward, so it's up to us to grab it and drive it forward. And then finally, there was the where, which I've left on another piece of paper over here. So local government, keen adoption there. Anywhere that needs age verification, be that face-to-face or online. Pensions, pension dashboard may drive that. And finally, C2C scenarios, peer-to-peer scenarios would be a good place to start, we thought, but then we're out of time. Okay, so thank you.
Is that working? Yeah, good. Hello, everyone. So we felt the most important thing was really to have a digital identity and to make use of a digital identity is you need to be able to do something with it. So we spoke about some of the use cases, some of the schemes that are here at the moment. We spoke about the more successful ones, so Bank ID, or we spoke about Verify and perhaps kind of looked at the reasons why Verify hasn't gained critical mass is because there's not many things you can do with it, unlike Bank ID, which can be used to log on to your bank account, something which you do by habit, something that you do often. So we felt that kind of maybe one of the best ways to scale would be to start with an organization that already has critical mass, such as a bank that already has a large number of users. There needs to be a reason for that transition from using the identities within their own organization to sharing those identities. We felt really that would come from support from government, maybe by regulation. So if there was regulatory pressure to actually move and make that happen, that would certainly help. So there are other key things that need to be done. Liability, there needs to be a liability model. There needs to be a commercial model. The process needs to be monetized, so it's just not going to happen if it was provided for free, if it was expected to be provided for free. We felt that the relying party would ultimately be the person that would pay for the use of that data. And then that's kind of really what we spoke about. How long will it take? It's a hard question. I think no one's ever really going to get it right. We felt to have the MASH, you would really need kind of at least 2 banks, maybe 2 mobile network operators. We discussed the fact that the Dutch did it in 2 years. You could do it in 2 years, who knows? It's a guess more than anything. As for kind of which industries need it, we started off with a small list. It got longer and longer and longer, but on the list we've got banks, gambling, insurance, airlines, age-related sales, telcos. I mean, there are many, many industries that could benefit from it. So I think it starts with banks. It's the most obvious. Thank you.
Okay, so a lot of the things that we discussed have already kind of been mimicked, and when you kind of get to the back tables, you're probably just going to stand up and say whatever they said was pretty much what we said as well. But to be honest, the kind of main points for us, which were mentioned at the very beginning, is trust. Unless it's trusted and adopted by lots of people that can spread the word and say how easy it is to use, how it is quick, it helps their day-to-day, it's just not going to be adopted. In terms of how long it's going to take, I think for us as industries to agree as to what identity actually is, and for the kind of citizens to then be able to use that as a pillar, it will be able to be adopted a lot quicker in terms of timescales. Don't know. And then in terms of industries that are going to adopt it, we agreed the ones that are part of day-to-day life, and one that we haven't really mentioned is travel. We all travel regularly, and so to be able to utilise and be able to utilise that ID within that process, things that we do each day, it's going to be adopted a lot quicker.
One thing that was mentioned, It's Me program in Belgium, and whether that was something we should look to in terms of interoperability. Other things that haven't been mentioned, fintechs, energy, MNOs as other sectors we should be looking at. And just that we shouldn't be looking for a one-size-fits-all approach. And I think we kept on referring to the fact that customers just don't care about digital identity. They want to get things done. They want a seamless experience. So we shouldn't talk to customers about digital identity at all, because they really don't care about it. So we should be thinking about frictionless experiences, helping customers get on with their lives. So I think that's the addition. Oh, well, you're welcome. Yeah, they don't care about it. They just want to get things done. So how do we help customers get on with their daily lives with a frictionless, safe experience?
So very similar conversations around our table to what's been said. So making it useful. So if there's a purpose to your identity, then people are going to use it. We talked about the national ID card scheme in the UK, and we had a bit of a conversation about why that wasn't successful. We started from a position of everyone was against it, and eventually came to the conclusion that actually it was a small number of people who were against it who just spoke very loudly. And that's a challenge with anything, that it's very easy for people to stand up and say that Verify doesn't work, the national ID card scheme's not the right thing, bank ID's not the right thing, but actually we need to be more positive about things and be more supportive. Provided that there's trust in the solution, then again people will start to adopt it. And there also needs to be trust within that system as well, so how the trust flows throughout that. Having multiple use cases so that people can use their identity in various different contexts, the things that we do every day. My example, using self-service to buy alcohol. It also needs ubiquity and interoperability. So it's fine that there are competing schemes, provided that there's the ability to interoperate. So again, from a consumer perspective, if I can go into one retail outlet and use my identity, and then I go in the next retail outlet and I can't use that identity, they've got a different scheme, then from a customer perspective, it's just not going to be successful. We looked at how long things that would take, and there was a feeling that actually things are going to be slow to emerge, and there isn't going to be a big bang. Again, we then flipped onto the opposite view, which was actually there could be a market event, there could be a huge terrorism event that actually results in identity becoming something that people say, yes, we must have it, and forget all the prior concerns, we want it. So there may be market events that happen, but generally we were on the slow to emerge. In terms of which industries and which sectors, so we had a lot of the ones that were mentioned. The one that hasn't been mentioned, that on our table at least was everyone's favourite, was porn.
So to speak, yeah.
Not our personal favourites, obviously. But also retailers, so e-commerce, and there are upcoming legislation around age verification that retailers will need to follow. Gambling sector, I think has been mentioned, NHS and health from the presentations earlier, and I think that's it. Thanks a lot.
I'm Frank Joshi from Envine, and on our table we had people from Barclays, IDEMIA, Indisol, Global Sign, and of course the one and only Harry Webber Brown. Obviously, a lot of the answers have already been given to the question so far, so perhaps I'll throw another couple of spins on it. How to scale digital identity? Well, to some extent, it's not a question of when. It's already happening at the moment. Organisations are having to do things separately, and they are creating different onboarding processes. So to say that it's going to happen in a year or 2 or 10, I think it's actually happening around us. The big issue is whether the end user will end up having to have 50 identities, or whether they'll have 1 or 2 or 3 that they can assert. So whether it's fragmented or whether it's actually joined up. And therefore, in order to get that kind of critical mass, we talked about all of the things we have been mentioned earlier. trust, a simple and consistent onboarding process. It's got to be easy. And in order for it to happen, maybe as was said right at the beginning, it has to be mandated. You know, I think we all know that if Gateway mandated the use of Verify to start with, guess what? Whether it was problematic, it would be used. So, you know, that may have to be an event that actually triggers it if we're worried about creating a government framework about it. But I think GDS have told us that that's not going to be the case. I think we also came to the consensus that, you know, there are so many things to be done across so many industries, and there's no point repeating the applications on the industries. But I think we're all of a general consensus that there has to be collaboration between us all in this room, and it has to be interoperable. Otherwise, ultimately, as citizens going down the line, we'll all end up with God knows how many different services. But also, to build critical mass, maybe it's a question of us simplifying the message to the market. You know, this is all about LOA 1 and LOA 2 and LOA 3. No, it's not. It's about simplifying our lives. What do we do currently? We go somewhere with our passport and our driving license and 3 proofs of identification for a lot of applications. And if we told a citizen that you won't have to take it physically, but you could do it digitally, great. I'm sure that would be a great message to take out. And the other thing about it that's a bit scary is that the longer we leave those old paper-based processes, the greater we're going to be leaving ourselves and our citizens to fraud. Because, you know, the process of now handing over papers to people, you know, and they nip around the corner and take a photocopy of it, is where I think where most of the fraud is going to take place. So I think, you know, if we can get some simple messages out to the market, it's going to help dramatically. I think I've already answered the questions about how long. I think it's happening now. It's just a question of whether it's going to be joined up or not. And in terms of sectors, I think we all agree there's just about every sector around us will need it. Shorter term, I think peer-to-peer could drive it because there's applications there. And then others where there's regulation involved, and maybe it's going to be with finance, with authenticating users, and perhaps gaming. Thank you.
Thanks. We didn't do a full bio of everyone on the table, but we did have David Rennie, which is, I think, the OAX equivalent of winning the golden ticket in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So whilst we didn't actually answer all 3 questions for me to discuss, we will be publishing a white paper on the subject in about 5 minutes.
You said you had to speak for 1 minute.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to spend 45 seconds talking about you, mate. So in terms of building a critical mass, there is, of course, a definition of what is a critical mass. That depends upon the service and the market you're in. We talked about similar things. You said earlier there's a lot of repetition by now. But we have a Silicon Valley representative, Charles, who said that if people perceive a 10 times benefit within a service, they will then choose to sacrifice their privacy and personal data in order to confer that benefit upon themselves, which maybe explains Amazon Prime. You can do what you want to me so long as I can watch Jeremy Clarkson and get my books tomorrow. Then there's a question of frequency of use. So if you have 5 million users who access your service once a year, how does that compare to having 1 million users who access your service daily? Answering a question with a question, as we always do. In terms of how long will it take, we had Rob from Innovate ID who was talking about a half-life of adoption. So basically each million users arrives in half the time of the previous million, which means you would reach your 25 million target for gov.uk Verify within 12 months. Now, I'm a little bit cynical on this half-life thing, because if you keep on going, the last million are added in 3 days. And if you carry on going after that, you'll be adding 1 million every 3 minutes, and you'll run out of people sooner or later. But we'll just go with that 12 months for now. And I'll also refer the audience to the excellent book by Malcolm Gladwell, The Tipping Point, in terms of achieving critical mass, because he refers to the 3 key players, who are the mavens, the networkers, and the salespeople. So the mavens are the people who basically check the rules, make sure that everything is as it should be. The networkers are the people who connect, and the salespeople are the people who convince people it's a good idea. So read that book instead of listening to me, but it'll take longer. And then in terms of the final question of industry sectors, again, we covered the same ones, although you don't call it porn whilst you're in Barclays, mate. They're adult services whilst you're in Barclays. But obviously financial services in terms of know your customer and fraud, and Barclays on the same side. Thank you.
So we focused on the 3rd question, thinking that everyone would focus on the first 2 questions. And really we were thinking about where is there a need for portable digital identity? We've not really had the word portable mentioned yet. And we were thinking about those situations where you need like a continuous journey, so you're doing repeated things. And so the two examples that we came up with were travel, which has been mentioned already, obviously, and with John on the table, inevitably we looked at education, thinking about the journey that someone takes, maybe through school, college, and then into the workplace, and maybe if you can join up kind of things that a customer has to do, that could be useful in terms of portability. A couple of other comments that were made. There was the observation that there's very few absolute imperatives for organisations to do digital identity properly. And in the context of that conversation, we had a bit of a discussion about PSD2 and the fact that in PSD2 you can get hold of transactional data, but not the identity data. And so it would be interesting to think about whether actually if the government or the regulator compelled banks, regulated for banks, to release that data, whether that would create some interesting new opportunities for organisations to actually leverage that data for identity purposes. And then we had a bit of a conversation about what digital ID is anyway. I think, we've probably all had that conversation. And it is a barrier, actually. The fact that we still probably don't talk the same language all the time is a problem.